You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Good morning, Force 13 Live. We're here yet again and we're tracking Hurricane Delta, which is rapidly intensifying in the western Caribbean Sea with its distinctive pinhole eye, which people have been very concerned about. We are now calling it a Category 3 with winds of 115 miles per hour and a pressure of 956 millibars. National Hurricane Center will probably confirm at least that category status soon. And this storm is likely to continue to intensify to Category 4 status and maybe even towards the higher reaches of that area, Category 4, borderline 5, as it approaches the Yucatan Peninsula. This storm, absolutely not to be messed with, and it does appear increasingly likely that this storm will strike the Yucatan. My name is Nathan Foy. I'm joined by our team in this hour of discussion. They'll be talking about potential US impacts as well. I'm joined by Ike, Ethan, Jacob, Isaac, Amy, Tim, and Yuxinado. Good morning to you all.
Good morning, Nathan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, obviously the main feature is Delta. Also, we've got the formation of Tropical Storm, is it Norbert today?
Yes, it is.
I always get confused between Norbert and Norman, and they're both in the same basin. And that's in the Eastern Pacific. And we've got Tropical Storm Chan-Hom, which now gale warnings are in effect for parts of Japan. But the main feature, obviously, is this. This is Delta. It's a fairly small hurricane, but that means, as we all know, with its very small eye as well, that it's got massive opportunity for further rapid intensification. We say further because we've already seen 24 hours of it, haven't we?
We have, Nathan, and what's been interesting with Delta is there have been a lot of people that have been trying to draw comparisons to this to Wilma 2005, and just in terms of the analog data, it is similar on the fact that its rate of intensification has been almost on par with what Wilma pulled in its first 24 to 36 hours, averaging right around 2.1 to 2.2 millibars per hour. However, the difference with Wilma is it pulled a span of 9.5 millibars over 6 hours. Delta has not quite done that just yet. However, the NOAA 2 and AF 306 passes have been indicating that Delta is starting to push towards that 4 millibars an hour intensification phase over the last 2 to 3 hours.
Wow. Now, what are they finding in the storm right now?
Last pass was 957. NOAA 2 is still currently in there. They are coming around on the south side of the storm, and they should be making another pass here, probably about 20, 25 minutes. So once that data comes in, we will get that to you.
We'll definitely be there for that, and the National Hurricane Center will be updating their information on the storm at the end of this hour. That's why we've decided to come on now. Just a heads up, we're also live later today as well, same time as yesterday, 4 till 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 till 4 Central. So we'll certainly have this storm covered from top to bottom, and you can see the infrared imagery here as well. This is called the sandwich imagery, and the eye still not very clear on the satellite imagery, but the temperature inside there has started to warm up just a little bit, which means that it's getting just a little bit deeper visibly.
Yeah, and what's even scarier about the storm is that it's still rapidly intensifying. Just like 24 hours ago, this is just formed as a tropical storm. Think about that. And
Yep.
Look at where it is now.
But then it's in a very similar location to Wilma with 50% higher ocean heat content.
Absolutely, Nathan. Looking at the maps that our team discussed yesterday, compared to the analogs that women have for ocean heat content, most of the OHC was to the west of Jamaica, going up through the Yucatan. Compared to what we have this year, it's not as robust in terms of the distribution, but it's more evenly distributed to where the ocean heat content, while maybe 150, 200 joules, is all the way across the West Central Caribbean, all the way up through the Yucatan. So Delta has had a lot more real estate to really get its act together, and we've seen that with easily, from my calculations, almost a 52, 53 millibar drop over the last 23 hours.
Moving at a decent pace as well as we look at this radar imagery from Isaac. Although you can see there the Cayman Islands very close to the storm, the closest islands right now, main islands. But I doubt many effects will be felt there in Grand Cayman.
Yeah, you can easily see on the radar site off of Grand Cayman here, just the pinhole eye, really well-pronounced pinhole eye, I must add here, that has been persistent for past, I would say, at least 12 hours or so, give or take here. Really unfortunate sign to see this still going on here with this storm, and of course the storm has a lot of potential here to continue strengthening on with time here throughout the next 24, 36 hours, give or take here, before it either makes landfall or comes really close to making landfall with the Yucatan here. I also want to note really quickly here, if this storm does officially get upgraded to a Category 3 major hurricane, this will be the first Category 3 major hurricane in this part of the world in the Western Caribbean since Hurricane Rina in 2011, just to put that for context.
That's a storm that most people have forgotten about as well by now.
Yeah, that storm Rina peaked as a low-end 115 mile per hour Cat 3. It was originally forecast to make a major hurricane landfall in roughly the same area where Delta is forecast to make landfall, but fortunately weakened to a 60 mile an hour tropical storm at landfall for that scenario.
Looking at the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, this was their last advisory from 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Can we make a determination at all whether it's still moving a little bit south of the forecast track? It's big ramifications if it is, by the way.
I'd have to take a look to see how it's been moving the last few hours. I know just off of the recon, it still does look like it is maintaining almost a northwest jog, probably.
Okay.
On the compass, you're probably talking like maybe 300 degrees.
Okay, that's interesting. And what do we think about the eventual landfall in the United States, which, from what I was looking this morning on models, now, a lot of people laugh at the CHP models, but it does give you a good idea as where the very best case and very worst case scenario is. And I got to tell you, the weakest ensemble there, the CHP 7, says that the storm will make landfall as a how strong was it? I think it was Category 1 hurricane in Louisiana. So that's going to be your minimum if the track forecast remains the same. Looks like it's going to be a hurricane landfall on the Gulf Coast, wherever it's going to be. What do we think?
This is a nightmare scenario, really, for the Gulf Coast, especially since Laura just ravaged the area to the west of it no more than about a month and a half ago. And now you're looking at possibly a direct landfall right over the New Orleans area if this holds right down the center line.
Yeah, it definitely has not been the best year for the Gulf Coast this hurricane season. I mean, with Laura happening and this happening, maybe a month and a half after this, will not be a really good scenario to play here. And regardless of how much it weakens from whatever intensity it is in the Gulf of Mexico, at that point it will probably be too little too late, and the impacts will still be life-threatening and damaging for wherever in the Gulf Coast it ultimately decides to make landfall in.
Now, Isaac, the GFS parallel model is suggesting that the storm, it's been suggesting for a while, it will go towards the western side of the forecast cone, and that would take it closer to you.
Yeah, I was looking at that the other night, and so far I want to say that's probably the only really kind of major model that's really been predicting that. Not saying it's not 100% rolled out yet, but definitely an interesting outcome if that does come true. And that'll of course
be a damaging hurricane for the Texas-Louisiana border, if I remember correctly, where that storm made landfall and then the GFS parallel, if that does come to fruition.
Something like
Something
that.
that I want to point out about the U.S. landfall is the only model that agrees with the National Hurricane Center's landfall point so far is the HMON. All other models have trended slightly west, really west of Morgan City. The National Hurricane Center currently forecasts landfall southeast of Morgan City, and we might be seeing a westward shift in the U.S. landfall point in the upcoming advisory.
Now, this is a webcam Ike's showing us here. This is in the Cayman Islands, right?
Yes.
Or it was until it stopped playing there, but you can see the conditions, nothing too major by the looks of things. A little bit rough along the coast.
Well, it was raining earlier.
Well, we could just sit and watch that try to load again, but it doesn't look like it will. So let's see if we can go somewhere else. Ethan, what are you showing us today?
Ethan's muted.
Ethan's not there right now. Well, we'll talk to him later. I think we can go over to an infrared view that I've been trying to get up for a little while from our member Jacob. You can see this here, and this details quite well how the eye has been, and I'd actually say compared to last night and overnight, it's become more centralized within the convection, or rather the convection's done a better job of surrounding the eye this morning, looking a lot more symmetrical, and now it's starting to, the pinhole, as we're expecting to see, is starting to deepen a little bit in the satellite imagery.
Yeah, really bad news to see there. I've been noticing that before we went on for the stream, the eye, where the eye would be on satellite imagery, getting more and more clear with time.
So to reiterate some of the warnings that are in effect, because obviously there are quite a few, and the situation's changed quite a bit since last night. For instance, Cuba's warnings have stepped down quite a bit. Hurricane warning, though, for Tulum to Zilam, Mexico, and the island of Cozumel. Tropical storm warning for the Cayman Islands, of course, the Cuban province of Pinar del Rio, the Isle of Youth, Punta Herrero to Tulum, and Zilam to Progreso, and a tropical storm watch for La Habana in Cuba as well. So no hurricane watches at this point.
And what's interesting, Nathan, is if those warnings hold up, that will be the second storm to impact the Tulum area within the last 10 days. Obviously, Tulum took a direct landfall from what was Tropical Storm Gamma, which a lot of people could argue was a hurricane at landfall. Obviously, we won't know that until the NHC goes through the TCR data and everything. But two major impacts for the Tulum area in 10 days, that's quite unheard of.
Well, is it unheard of? Certainly uncommon and bad for the area. Just looking at latest satellite imagery right now, I'm trying to establish whether the eye is continuing to deepen from the top down. Looks like the answer might be no, because we had minus 69 degrees Celsius in the cloud in the center earlier, and a higher temperature denotes more further down to the surface that you can see, basically. Minus 69 it was earlier, now it's down again to minus 73, so any idea what that might be short term?
I mean, I wouldn't really know looking unless I pull up radar data.
Well, yeah, looking back
looking
at your
at radar
radar there, yeah.
Yeah, looking at radar data, it looks like the eye may be getting a little bit more cloud filled in those last few frames, but then it could also be, now that the storm has been away from the radar site in the Cayman Islands, I mean, may not be just able to get a good view of what the storm looks like internally, because it has to go through the first northeastern quadrant there to get a look at that eye there from the radar beam. But yeah, looking at radar, if this is to be believed here, maybe perhaps first rumblings here, maybe trying to get going with another eye wall replacement cycle here.
This is what I'm
Perhaps.
thinking, you know. That eye at the moment, though, the pinhole, that's what, 6 miles wide?
I believe so, yes.
And if it was to have an eye wall replacement right now, the new eye would be something like 20 miles wide.
Yeah, definitely radar is showing some rumblings that may be trying to take place here. And of course,
Even
Recon. But
even at 20 miles wide, though, after an eye wall replacement cycle, which you would imagine from a pinhole of this tiny size to a larger eye would be still quite quick, you could still look at some rapid intensification before landfall.
yeah, exactly. This still has roughly 24, 36 hours still to intensify furthermore if it wants to, and it appears to be taking full advantage of that, unfortunately, at this time. And yeah, just looking at radar, looks like it may be trying to do an owl filtration cycle. Recon is we're gonna get recon data really soon here, and I'll update you guys about that when that
Don't tell
comes
me
in.
it's going to be one of those storms that strengthens during an eye wall replacement.
We'll find. Oh, recon data just came in.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think they're not. I don't think they're in the eye just yet. But so far, peak SFMR of wow, peak SFMR of 98 knots, non-suspect.
All right.
98 knots, and a pressure down to 959.9 millibars flight level.
We're also joined by Kay right now. What are your thoughts seeing this today? What you expected last night?
What I feared last night,
Okay.
unfortunately. At this point, I have been looking at the radar myself, and I don't believe it's an eye wall replacement cycle. I believe it's the moat becoming evident, the eye wall's becoming that intense that it's suppressing rain activity near it.
Okay.
We've got some recon news. Recon has just passed through the eye wall of the storm, and we got a SFMR rating of 98 knots. If that was believable, that would support an intensity of 115 miles per hour.
Well, that was relayed a moment ago, Ethan, and non-suspect apparently.
I believe so.
I'm looking at the rain rates now.
I mean, we really wouldn't be surprised if that's legitimate because
It is accompanied by a rain spike,
okay.
so I would discount that reading. It's also lower than the flight level. Sorry, higher than the flight level.
All right then. If you've got any comments or questions whilst we're on the air here, we've got discussion going on for this hour. Towards the end of the hour, the National Hurricane Center will be updating with the latest advisories, not just on Delta, but also on Norbert, and believe it or not, Marie is still going in the Eastern Pacific as well. I'm sure people are really interested to hear about those. Delta's the main feature though, and we'll obviously have news on that just as soon as it arrives. And the first question that I've just seen there, the 6C HWRF is showing a 162 mile per hour category 5, and do we think that's a probability?
Category 5 is entirely possible.
Well, we've given it a 48% chance.
Earlier ships was giving it a 46% chance of 145 knots, I believe.
Wow. So that's category 5 plus a bit more.
But the thing is that currently going at about 5 to 6 millibars an hour since Recon's been in the plane. Oh dear, I said that again. Recon's been in the storm. Yeah.
You lost your train of thought on that now, haven't you?
Okay, I've got it back now. 5 to 6 millibars per hour is what we expect with a storm that's going for Category 5 status. With storms that intensify this rapidly, they tend to intensify at a more reasonable rate until they get into the 950s, and then as they get to major hurricane status, they develop a strong enough core to be able to explode. And we saw this with Wilma. It intensified fairly casually for compared to what it later did. and then it got to 954 and broke all global records for intensification. And it appears that Delta is doing a similar thing in terms of it's now shooting up in terms of the rate of intensification.
So you really
Yeah.
think that the spike is still yet to come?
I think that the spike is happening.
Yeah, that was part of the research Kay, you and I did off air yesterday, where we found when we did that 9.8 over 6 hours. Right now, from what I've been seeing off of the center fixes, Delta is averaging about 4 millibars per hour as of the AF and NOAA 2s. So the spike is there. I just don't think it's quite to WMA levels yet, but there is 36 hours. We could still see it pull that out somewhere.
I think that the most rapid intensification is going to be happening before landfall in the Yucatan, and I believe that the peak pressure will happen in the Caribbean.
Probably.
If it gets to Category 5, it's either going to have to miss the Yucatan, stay in the channel and keep intensifying, or it's going to do it at landfall, which is not what we want.
And just a reminder, when are we expecting landfall?
Early in the morning tomorrow, local time.
I'd say a little bit later than that, probably around 24 hours from now, probably. Or maybe
That
slightly,
late?
slightly before 24 hours, maybe.
Yeah, but my best indications are suggesting that it's going to be something like 6 a.m. local time, or 7 a.m.
Yeah. Just after sunrise.
Hmm.
I mean, that's better than a nighttime landfall. At least people will see the trees falling over rather than just hearing them.
Well, I mean, still, the entrance of the storm will occur under darkness.
That is correct, yes.
Let's get some more questions. What is the strongest Greek alphabet storm on record before 2020? Well, that record still stands.
Beta.
Beta.
Is
Category.
Delta more intense than Beta now?
No. Not
Is it
officially.
not?
I don't think so.
What were the stats on Beta? I can't remember now.
Beta at peak 115,962.
Oh,
So
okay.
yes, Delta is more intense.
Yeah.
So now the answer is Delta.
Well, not officially yet.
Although, well, intense is distinctly different from strongest, and the question was strongest, which is still Beta for a little bit longer, but not much by the looks of things. In the worst case scenario for Cozumel or Cancun, what would your predictions be for the wind speed?
Record equaling for the Atlantic Basin.
Really?
We could easily see 185 if this peaks at landfall and intensifies it, similarly to how Wilma did, or how Allen did, or how Gilbert did.
Well, yes, but that's not yet likely, is it?
You would never say it's likely because it's so rare, but it's entirely within the realm of possibility for a worst case scenario.
Oh, of course,
we
the
just
question
got-
said worst case scenario. Yeah, okay.
I'm on board with Kay with this one. If this holds that westernmost track and goes right over Cozumel, Cancun, it's going to be a nightmare. You're probably, if it does keep its intensification phase all the way up, yeah, you're looking like a Wilma, Allen, Gilbert scenario of.
It would easily be in the top 5 most intense Atlantic landfalls ever recorded, where it's happened.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're looking at near catastrophic devastation. I would not be surprised once Devin runs the numbers if this would not be a CDPS 8 or 9 at the worst case scenario. Now, obviously, we're not saying that is what is going to happen.
Tim,
but
I actually
the
don't
areas are
think it.
there.
I don't think it would, because it's so small and it's not going to produce a huge ton of rain.
Have you covered what Devon said about the cut-off for stage 7?
No.
He said that if it gets to 150 at landfall, it would be a stage 7.
150 miles an hour.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so, yeah. And that might be the mitigating factor on why this won't make an 8 or a 9. And that's actually a good point you brought up, Kate, is the rainfall threat. This is such a small storm
And it's thankfully moving fast. The only good thing about it.
Reconnaissance has just flown through the storm, and they have confirmed once again that the eye wall is closed completely.
No surprise there. Yeah, it would have to have an unfathomable intensity if it was going to be a stage 10, for instance. It would have to have like 240 mile an hour winds or something really silly like that.
It's not even Patricia.
Unless it grew.
With this size.
Unless it grew and or slowed down.
Thankfully, neither of those things are likely.
Yeah. So that's a tiny bit of good news. And, well, if the storm does make a landfall, which is more likely than not at the moment, and more likely than not to be a major, at least right now, like the wind field is very small, isn't it? It's only about 80 nautical miles in radius at most.
It's a very compact storm.
I think 90 miles tropical storm force, 25 hurricane force, I think was the last number that we had.
Hurricane force, this is the intermediate update, is hurricane force winds extend outward up to 25 miles or 35 kilometers from the center, and tropical storm force winds extend outward up to 90 miles or 150 kilometers.
What is the chance that Delta could still hold major hurricane status at the US landfall? And how is Gamma doing? Well, on the first question, US landfall is unlikely, given the cooler waters offshore. It's not a 0%, but I'd say maybe a 10%. What do you guys think?
I think it's really going to come down to how close it skirts the Yucatan. If it misses the Yucatan and it's able to maintain itself through the Gulf, then I think your chances go up. If it goes over the Yucatan like the NHC current track is showing, then your chances go down, since obviously it's going to mitigate what intensity it's going to be approaching the U.S. at. So it's really, I would say, a coin flip on major impacts. It just depends on how close it goes up or down that track.
Every time I see this, I just think of Lily in 2002, which was a Category 4 in the central Gulf of Mexico, and really capitulated just before it struck the coast, and was only a Cat 1 when it struck land. Obviously still a significant storm, and it was retired, but I think it's quite difficult to get a Category 3 to make landfall over there in October.
Unfortunately, because this storm is peaking before the Gulf of Mexico, it will be larger and have a bigger wind field than Lily did, and therefore it won't weaken as quickly.
Interesting. Certainly not ruling it out, and Category 2, I would say, is a distinct possibility for landfall.
The National Hurricane Centre is still expecting a 105 mile an hour landfall, if I remember correctly.
And I think by the time it does, it'll be too little too late, and the impacts will still be severe and life-threatening for wherever it decides to make landfall on the coast.
And regarding Gamma, well, what can you say about Gamma? What's left of it is still there, actually, and looking better than it almost ever did. Massive amounts of convection on the western side of the Yucatan Peninsula, but I'm not seeing any rotation. What do we think?
Breaking news, recon data just came in for Hurricane Delta. I apologize for interrupting. The news data is indicating a pressure flight level at least down to 956.7 millibars, and a peak SFMR of 102 knots, non-suspect, with another reading also non-suspect of 101 knots.
I would say that news is more important than discussing Gamma, so more evidence there of a Category 3.
Flight level winds 108 knots as well.
So those numbers are continuing to rise.
Hopefully they got the drop zone in the eye this time.
This is in the northwestern quadrant, I must add too, not even in the northeast, which usually would have the strongest winds in the tropical cyclone.
So we're probably looking at 120 miles per hour now.
120?
Like I said,
Maybe.
Depends what they find in the northeast quadrant if they decide to do in the last pass before they leave for this mission here, but regardless, if it does become a major, which seems really likely and near certain at this point in time, It'll, like I said earlier, the stream, it'll be the first major hurricane, Category 3 or above hurricane, to happen in the Western Caribbean here since Hurricane Rina in 2011, and that peaked as 115 mile per hour Cat 3. This has the potential to peak even higher than that.
Just trying to get a better read on the storm structure just now.
So while the first pass through the southeast eye wall had suspect SFMR, these are absolutely not suspect. There is very reasonable rain rates to actually decreasing as you enter the eye wall. So
Something that you note as well, Nathan, piggybacking off of what Kay has noted, just looking at the raw data off of the NOAA 3, the center fixes have indicated a 2 millibar drop between its first and second pass. However, the second and third pass only has a deepening rate of about a half millibar over the last hour. So I'm not sure what the team wants to draw from that.
this is only the extrapolated pressure, of course, and in such a
Correct.
pressure gradient, it can miss the center.
Yeah, that is correct, and that's what I'm basing this information off of. Is the extrapolated? Obviously, we'll know more when the drop zone comes in, but just off the extrapolated, it does look like its intensification phase is starting to level off just a little bit.
I wouldn't say it's leveling off so quickly, but it might be doing a stair-stepping fashion where it does big jumps, pauses, and then does another big jump.
It's very possible, but this would be the first center fix that I've seen off the last two missions where the deepening rate has not been that steep. Of this one only being a half millibar, whereas the last 5 or 6 center fixes that I've seen have been 2.5 millibars. So
Yeah.
we'll have to see what that drop comes in at.
I'm just hoping they managed to get the drop zone in the eye this time, because the last pass they made, the eye was so small they didn't manage to get the drop zone in it, and they had to self-extrapolate it alone.
It does get a bit tough when the eye is this small.
You've only got about 30-second window to be in the eye.
Yeah, you figure you're in a quad engine, basically C-130 cruising at about 300 miles an hour, and you got a 6 nautical mile eye to try to drop a drop zone in. That gives you kind of perspective of what the hurricane hunters go through.
Almost like trying to do clay pigeon shooting in the middle of a hurricane.
That would be that's a good analogy there, okay? I'll give you that one. That one's good.
So there again is the latest visible imagery, the GOES 16 mesoscale 1 minute rapid scan. And the storm's movement still looks to have a westward element, to me at least, although it's not a long loop to look at there. But interesting to note, shortly there'll be another loop that will show you the storm from the Yucatan's perspective and how foreboding that's starting to look.
I would definitely agree it's moving more west than it is north.
Interesting.
I've got some imagery up on my screen that shows the storm from a distance.
Yes, Ethan has more zoomed out imagery there and a longer loop as well. And sometimes it's better to look at the, even though, I mean, you know, people might think best quality must surely be the best way to forecast storms. Well, not necessarily, because sometimes you have to look at the big picture to see how the storm's progressed over, say, a 6-hour period rather than a 6-minute period, and the grand scheme of things on the map as well. And you'll realize when you look at this that the storm is actually quite small, although that obviously means that it has a higher chance of being very intense.
Yeah, as of the intermediate advisory from the National Hurricane Center, tropical storm force winds extend outwards only 90 miles from the center, which is quite a short distance from a storm that's that strength. And hurricane force winds are even smaller, only extending 25 miles out to the center at max.
Yes, just getting something up here. The National Hurricane Center will be updating on this storm soon, and the updates for the East Pacific storms will be out also. Norbert and Marie, currently active and not doing very much. There's also 2 areas of interest there in the Eastern Pacific, both at low chances. And in the Atlantic, there is nothing out there the next 5 days after Delta, at least at the moment. But the way things are going in this hurricane season, we might get many more storms yet. This is the 26th tropical cyclone of the Atlantic hurricane season. And usually by now in the season, we're probably at, what, 9 or 10?
Yeah.
Maybe 12 or 13 on an active season.
An active season.
Yeah, this has just been nothing short of insane. I know our team back in April, and then we re-upped it in June. I know Colorado State, Wisconsin, all of them. Everybody was calling for an active season. We were thinking maybe the end of the alphabet, but I don't think anybody, if they had to put money on it, was saying we'll be in Greece by October.
Nobody was expecting to even come close to 2005.
Mm.
And unlike
Yeah,
2005, if there's one, I guess, fortunate thing about this season, thus far at least, is that most of the storms have been fairly on the weak side compared to how they were in 2005. Most storms in 2005 were majors at least, and unfortunately happen to be threatening land mostly at that intensity as well too, unlike this season. But still, regardless, the season has been still a destructive one, regardless of that. Of course, with Hurricanes Laura, Hannah, and many other hurricanes that have been impacting and threatening the United States since this hurricane season started. So still a season to take seriously here regardless, especially now that we have Delta going on in the Caribbean right now.
Yeah, that is probably the only silver lining for this season is, yeah, we've had almost as many named-storms 2005, as Isaac noted. We have not had that many hurricane impacts, thankfully. I know we had Category 4 Laura. We had Hannah as Category 1, Ezeus at Category 1. So it's not like we had with 2005 where we had a multitude of 2s, 3s, and 4s that were raking the entire Atlantic.
It's just been brought to my attention that Recon is experiencing significant turbulence in the eyewall now, which is indicative of a storm that's definitely still rapidly intensifying.
Okay.
Still waiting for that drop zone to come in. Once it does,
So, with the storm I mean, how well is the storm doing for intensity compared to the model forecasts at this point? The ones that have been
that
aggressive.
drop bond is in, and it supports 955 millibars.
that still maintains a 2 millibar drop an hour.
Very interesting. But compared to what models have been calling for, the HWRF and HMON in particular, which have been calling for the storm to get near Category 5 status, how is it doing operationally compared to what they forecasted?
I think Ethan ran the numbers this morning,
And the ship's model, of course, as well, yes.
Yeah, I think Ethan ran the numbers this morning about 9 a.m. and I think just about every operational mark we were seeing from Recon has been beating the model guidance, at least in the short term. We'll have to see how it does in the long term.
I just want to point out with that latest drop zone, it did indeed miss the center, so the pressure is probably lower than 955 over.
And in a storm like this, that's a sharp gradient.
Yes, so it might be prudent to go lower than 955.
Absolutely.
Yeah, drops on 22, 957, 25 knots, and if it did miss the eye itself, it's probably 954, 953 easily. So now you're talking a 4 millibar drop off the last pass, and that was just an hour ago. So it is still maintaining a 4 millibar drop over the last 2 recon missions.
It's rather ominous to watch, that's for sure. And of course, we will have this on our automated live stream as well once we finish our commentary here at the end of the hour. Our 24/7 automated coverage will show you the storm in real time, among everything else that's going on around the world. And of course, we will be on the air again with commentary tonight, or this afternoon local time, 4 p.m. on the US East Coast. But we're waiting for the updates from the National Hurricane Center. They'll probably be a while because the recon plane is still in the storm, so it looks like they'll wait for the very latest observations from them.
We've got
So
the
with
update
regard-
we've got the update on Chen Hum from the GTWC. Peak is actually down to 90 miles per hour
Wow.
from 100.
With regards to your question about the models, at the 060 run of the HWRF and HMON, they had, at 12 hours, they had delta just dropping below 960. So they're at least 3 hours behind.
Wow, 6 hours behind.
But then after 12 hours, the HWRF goes crazy and drops 20 millibars in 6 hours.
Do you think that will be accurate?
I think it's a little bit of a resolution error. It tends to jump, and you've got to sort of smooth it out to work out what's actually going on.
I see.
But, 6 hours, Wilma dropped 50 in that time, so I mean it's entirely possible with an either smooth that it could drop more than 20.
We've already seen it drop 20 over the last two missions, Kay. I mean, you're talking the center fixes off of the AF300 was 974, 970. First four center fixes off of NOAA 2, 962, 957, maybe 954. And I think those are only about 4 or 5 hours apart from the AF300 and the NOAA 2. So you're still talking a 4 millibar drop. I know Wilma had that 9.8 over 6 hours, so.
Update is out on Norbert, 45 miles per hour, 1002 millibars, little change in strength.
Marie is out as well, and they have it still as a tropical storm. So everyone will be really pleased to hear that information.
But the concerning thing about the 06E guidance is that every single model has a landfall in Cancun.
It's not good.
Not at all. And if anything, Delta has moved towards the southern edge of the guidance over the last over the 6 hours. So it's unlikely to miss, in my opinion.
Now, Isaac, you're still looking at the radar imagery there as it slowly slips away from Grand Cayman. Anything else that you can deduce regarding its eye in the more recent frames?
Still maintaining, it looks like here, still seeing that little kind of moat there. Still well pronounced pinhole eye if I've ever seen one there. Really classic textbook example of a pinhole eye we're seeing right there on radar imagery, and just incredible. And if this storm does end up hitting near the Cancun area, this will unfortunately be probably at this point in time likely the strongest storm to hit that part of the world since Hurricane Wilma made landfall there as I believe a Category 4 if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So residents in Cancun need to be really watching this system carefully and taking it seriously as well too. This is going to be their first threat in over 10 years here.
I mean, if this gets to a Category 5, which is still possible, the last one to strike that area would have been Gilbert.
You are correct.
And we all know how Gilbert was. That was another really incredible storm in its own right there. Not saying this is going to exactly going to do that, but
yeah.
Just a little analog.
Gilbert was the second most intense Atlantic hurricane landfall, tied with Camille.
Mm-hmm.
So that just puts it in perspective for the viewers that are listening. You're hearing us throw out Gilbert. You're hearing us throw out Wilma. Delta is could end up entering that elite class of storms. So Cozumel, Cancun, if you're not preparing, you need to prepare now.
We have the vortex data message here, and
Okay.
the eye is closed. It is circular with a diameter of 5 nautical miles. That's down 3. The eye is contracted. The surface winds are indeed major hurricane. Flight level supports it, as does rain rate. And the flight level temperature inside the eye is 7 degrees higher than outside the eye.
Ooh. On satellite, it's looking very odd, but the radar still showing that it's got a very impressive sender. You look at the satellite there, the very recent frames, all looks very fractured around the eye area, and almost like there is a bigger eye there. But then, no, from what you're seeing and what we've been hearing, the pinhole eye is still very much there. Will it appear is the big question I guess we've got right now.
I think it's almost inevitable that it will appear. But if I'm just going to check a fact quickly.
Okay. In the meantime, again, let's just reiterate some of the key messages for this storm, and I think you may be aware of quite a few of them, but just to reiterate, extremely dangerous storm surge and hurricane conditions are expected within portions of the northern Yucatan Peninsula beginning tonight, and a hurricane warning is in effect. Heavy rainfall will affect portions of the Cayman Islands, western Cuba, and the northern Yucatan Peninsula through the midweek. This rainfall could lead to significant flash flooding and mudslides. The potential for heavy rain and flash flooding will increase across portions of the central Gulf Coast, Tennessee Valley, and southeastern United States as Delta moves inland later this week. And Delta is forecast to approach the northern Gulf Coast late this week as a hurricane. While there is large uncertainty in the track and intensity forecasts, big note on that one, there is a significant risk of dangerous storm surge, wind and rainfall hazards along the coast from Louisiana to the western Florida Panhandle beginning Thursday night or Friday. Ensure that your hurricane plan is in place and monitor updates for Delta's forecast. Do you still think that storm surge will be a big, or maybe the biggest issue with this storm for the US Gulf Coast?
I would say storm surge is definitely going to be a factor all up and down the Gulf Coast. I mean, right now, last NHC estimate has 105 miles an hour. That's easy going to be strong enough to generate maybe 6 to 10, maybe 12 feet of storm surge all along the Louisiana coastline down through the Texas and maybe over towards the Mississippi and Alabama areas. We'll have to see what the NHC gives for their next update here at 11, and that'll really paint maybe a little bit better picture of what the impacts will be for the U.S.
So I was correct in my understanding. Delta's eye is now the same size as Hurricane Charlie's eye. And that went from 110 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour in 6 hours.
That was another infamous hurricane there too. I remember that was forecast initially, I believe, hit Tampa, but it veered more to the south and hit, I think it was Punta Gorda, Florida instead.
Yes, it did. And it's interesting that we're comparing these to these classic 2004, 2005 hurricanes.
Well,
It just really goes to show how serious this storm is.
that looks like this is going to be the year for our generation, it would seem.
Yeah.
The
Like I
year where
said,
everything rapidly intensified and ignored shear.
Yeah, something like that.
And like I said earlier, if this becomes a major hurricane, which seems pretty much almost certain at this point in time, when a new update comes in shortly here, it'll of course be the first major hurricane, Category 3 or higher hurricane in this part of the world in the Western Caribbean since Hurricane Rina in 2011. If we could wrap your brain around that, that's incredible. Just how long of a gap there was in between perhaps major hurricanes here that we're seeing. And for reference, sorry for interrupting, Tim, but for reference, Hurricane Rina only peaked as a 115 mile per hour Cat 3. This has the potential to peak even higher than that. Tim?
Yeah, I was just touching based off what Nathan was saying, that this could be the year for this generation, and this kind of puts out to the viewers just how old I am. I remember the big year for my generation, and I'll put it out there. I'll be 36 here in January, but I distinctly remember 1995 being like the year that everybody remembers. And then you go to the generation below me, and most everybody remembers 2005. You get to this next generation below them.
Sorry to interrupt, Tim, but the update is out. 115 miles per hour and 955 millibars. They're expecting a 140 mile per hour peak and a second peak at 130 miles per hour. I think they may now be suggesting a Category 3 landfall. Can't tell yet, for the US that is. Can't tell whether that's the case or not. Maybe not. It's hard to tell, but we'll see the cone a little bit later. No changes to the warnings.
I've been keeping my eye on Recon, and they are, looks like they've turned around and they're going back for a northwest to southeast pass this time.
They're currently repositioning,
And
but
sorry,
they're not finished yet, is the good news.
sorry to interrupt Tim during his...
Oh no, your information is a lot more important than me reminiscing over previous seasons. That just shows how old I am.
Well, no, I mean, it's important in a different way, but there you
Well,
have it. This is hit in the here and now.
NHC's trying their best to break the tension of Delta.
Cone
And they're
has
saying
shifted,
Marie's on life support.
Cone has shifted much more towards the west.
Ooh. This cone isn't up to date just yet, but as soon as the cone updates, you'll know about it. So we'll just watch that graphic, and we'll wait for their forecast discussion as well and see what they've got to say about this one, this update.
Landfall location is now southwest of Morgan City, Louisiana. They do forecast a Category 1 on the day 4 point just over Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with winds of 80 miles per hour. That's after landfall.
Probably still suggesting a Category 2 landfall then.
Yep.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I was going to say by that point, the storm should be significantly larger, like what Kay has been alluding to and other people on this call have been alluding to. So if it weakens, it would be probably too little too late, and the impacts will still be. I really want to stress this to people too. Regardless of category, impacts are still forecast to be severe and life-threatening here for wherever Delta ends up making landfall along the Gulf Coast of the United States here. Regardless of intensity, this is still a serious and life-threatening hurricane to be taken seriously for anybody that's going to be in the path of this.
So again, we're just waiting for that new cone that we'll bring to you as soon as we can, but the latest from National Hurricane Center is that they're now expecting a 140 mile per hour peak soon, and then before landfall in the Yucatan, and then a secondary 130 mile an hour peak. Is anyone surprised about that they might have gone a little bit low?
I'm concerned about it because they're showing 140 miles an hour in 12 hours and then 140 miles an hour at landfall. And you would assume there would be a higher peak in between those 2 points.
Now, is the 24-hour point after landfall?
I believe that it's just at landfall.
Let's read the discussion that's just come out. Satellite imagery and recent NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft data show that Delta is a very symmetric and compact hurricane. The aircraft reported a tiny 5 nautical mile wide eye, which has also been seen in radar imagery, as we've been seeing, and there is a hint of a pinhole eye in the infrared satellite data. The central pressure has continued to fall, with the latest center drop wind sun data supporting a pressure of 955. A peak flight level wind of 109 knots, believable SFMR winds of 102 knots, So Delta is the third major hurricane of the 2020 hurricane season. 55 knot increase in wind speed in 24 hours. Low wind shear, deep warm waters, and sufficient mid-level moisture are expected to support additional rapid intensification through today. And the only reason that the strengthening could slow is if a difficult-to-predict eye-wall replacement cycle begins. That's what they're putting that down to, I think.
If you read a bit further on, it says that the NHC intensity forecast is above the various intensity aids and calls for it to be a Category 4, but it could be stronger than indicated below since landfall is predicted to occur between the 12 and 24-hour points, but they expect it to be in the Gulf by point 24.
Yeah, there's a little bit more to that as well, Kay. They are indicating through their discussion that some reduction in intensity is likely when Delta moves overland, but the conditions over the southern Gulf are expected to support some reintensification, as the NHC forecast shows a second peak at the 48 and 72-hour mark. And just looking at their forecast, this looks like this could still be a Category 3 at 110 knots, almost 190 miles away from Bayou Vista in Louisiana. So this, and I'd say a Category 3 landfall is possible, but I'm not going to say it's probable right now.
Got the
There's
newest
the new cone.
When you're talking 105 to maybe 115, I mean, that's really going to be close to call on whether it's actually going to be a major or not.
The new cone, not much has changed, really.
Yeah, you could see a, like Ethan was saying, a little bit of a westward jog there in the newest cone. You can see the it looks like they have it, like you guys stated earlier, making landfall, probably around 7 or 8 in the morning local time Wednesday.
Yes.
It does make landfall.
Yeah.
I think what the NHC is saying with their forecast is that we don't have the model support or the certainty to forecast higher than 140, but that it could well be stronger.
That's a fair comment. We've got a few more minutes here. Well, not much actually, so we'll just see if we can get through some more questions. Tag Force 13 with any questions that you have. And I can't see any at the moment. There's been a lot of comments that I've been trying to sift through, so it's been quite difficult. But we will be finishing shortly, so just any more comments from the team whilst you still can get words in here.
Yeah, just taking a quick look at the 11 a.m. cone posted by the National Hurricane Center. I'm just doing a little bit of geography, and if this goes down the center line, which obviously we know it may not, but you're looking at a landfall between Puerto Morelos and El Rey. It would put it south of Cancun, but you're talking a distance of maybe 18 miles. So Cancun would get hurricane conditions if the radii of hurricane force winds stays the same at this point.
All right, we're wrapping things up here. We will be live again at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Let's take some questions before we finish, though. Will Delta hit Houston?
They're not in the cone right now, but maybe extreme parts of the border between Louisiana and Texas, or maybe as far west as Beaumont, may get an impact here of some sort if the western part of the forecast cone comes to fruition.
Will we beat 2005? Of course we're going to get that question in. It looks like that we will for name storms.
2 months left. We need two more name storms. Yeah, that's very possible.
Chances of this missing the Yucatan to the north? Not much of a chance anymore. What's with the wave in the Eastern Caribbean? Some people have spotted that one as well.
It's unlikely to form in the short term because outflow from Delta would be disrupting any anything it tries to do. But it may be that we have to start looking at it once Delta moves out of the picture.
Interesting comment there. Could it be a Category 5? Well, that's quite an obvious question to ask, and unfortunately we don't have the answer for you yet. But, well, it's getting on towards a coin toss in terms of chances.
Yeah, intensity guidance has been going crazy for it past few days here. Well, not few days, but a day or two since the storm's really been active for the most part. Because I believe the storm barely formed around this time yesterday, if I'm not mistaken.
55 knot increase in that time, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A huge threat for southern Alabama? Question mark.
Well, they are in the
further
cone.
east after it gets past Yucatan, then yeah.
Yeah, can't be ruled out.
They are in the forecast. Extreme western Florida panhandle to probably about Beaumont, Texas, is roughly where the cone lays at here from the west to east.
Well, that's us finished for now. We'll be back online with another commentary stream at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And in the meantime, you can follow our automated feed showing the cyclone live and everything else that's going on around the world. And you can join our live discussion after this stream on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13. We'll see you again later. This storm continues to intensify and could be one of the big storms of this year. Stay tuned later on.